Yes.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Lake County. I'm your host, David Rich. I have a very special guest on today, G.H.Merrit, who turns out we actually were students together in the College of Lake County horticulture program. And when I reached out to her but to come on the show about a completely different topic, she's like, wait, I know that name. And I'm like, okay, so here we are. It's just, it all comes back. It all comes full circle, doesn't it? So anyway, she is the chair, the Lake County chair, right? Of it. What's that?
I'm the chairman of the whole organization.
Oh, okay. Well, even better. It's called New Illinois. And I'm not, I know what it is, but I'm going to go ahead and give the baton, the mic over to GH here. And why don't you go ahead and tell us what it is? Because this is fascinating stuff. Go ahead.
Okay. So if I go on and on and on, you just stop me.
Okay.
But New Illinois is a nonprofit organization with the mission of educating Illinoisans about their right under Article 4, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution to pursue the formation of a new state separate from the state of Illinois. Underneath that umbrella, we have three focus areas. The most important one is representative government. Next, government corruption. And third, our state's fiscal disaster. And so people often assume this is a red-blue party thing, and it isn't. What it is, it's more of a urban versus rural, small town and suburban thing.
Sure.
And one of the things, besides thinking that it's a party thing, and people will say, you're a Nazi, you're a racist, you're a Trumpster. And I don't even belong to a political party. I care about stuff, sure. But I feel like, especially in my position, I'm better off not belonging to any party, because what we are advocating for isn't, it's something that could be beneficial to everyone, regardless of where they are in the political spectrum, because nobody benefits if you don't have representative government. Nobody benefits from a corrupt government, and nobody's going to benefit when Illinois goes over a financial cliff, which they're on the path to do. And so another thing I should mention is we are not the only state split organization in the state of Illinois. What we do, we lobby people in the legislature to support what we're doing. We educate people on a local level through county committees, and we are creating an organizational infrastructure for a new state government. And related to that, we have a draft that our committee is working on of a state constitution. And the other organization is called Illinois Separation Referendum, and you might have heard of them on the news. Typically what happens in the media is they mix us and the other group together, and then they add in the state of Indiana that was talking about annexing Illinois counties. So it's three different things. But Illinois Separation, they started more downstate, and what they do is invite an advisory referendum on county ballots, and it's just whether what the people think about ideation. And so far, they've been on 33 county ballots, and in each case, it's won by a landslide. This fall, they're going to be on, I don't know how many more ballots, maybe 10. And so then you're talking about it's getting to the point where close to half of the counties in Illinois have made it clear that this is what they want. And so we both have the same end goal, but we both have different activities in reaching that goal. And so that's the basics, David.
Okay, no, that's very cool. That's very interesting. Thank you. When and how did this organization start, or whichever one was like the movement itself? Like, who formalized it into an actual organization?
Well, our group started in spring of 2018, and the other group also started in spring of 2018. Although the whole idea goes back to the 1800s. And there have been other efforts, but they were always regional. They weren't organized. Some of them were before the telephone. All of them were before the internet. And so now this is the first time in Illinois history that this is happening all over the state. And so how New Illinois started, I was one of the people, and I live in Lake County, and a guy named Jeff from McHenry County, we were just talking about how Illinois was a dumpster fire. And my husband and I had thought about, well, we don't know where we're moving to, but we sure ain't staying here. But then my dad built my house, and he had since died. And I thought, I don't want to sell my house. And I had this really strong sense that the corrupt politicians of Illinois were like pushing me out. And you do see that Illinois has one of the highest out-migration rates in the country. People are leaving because the taxes are high and because the government's corrupt. And with that scenario, you also have more opportunities elsewhere because businesses are leaving here. And so Jeff and I thought, this would be a good idea, but we have absolutely no idea what we're doing. And so we decided to contact people in other states that had had similar movements. And, like in Colorado, they had counties that had vote themselves in another state. And so there's different movements all over, but we hooked up with New California, and they're a group that kind of mentored us, and they're doing exactly what we are. They're trying to separate from LA and San Francisco and Sacramento, because what has happened is that the densely populated urban areas control the entire state. And so then you have people in other areas. There may be a law that makes perfect sense for a densely populated urban area, but it doesn't make sense if you live in like Elizabethtown or, some place out in the middle of nowhere. Right. And so, and another factor that's really key, even though there've been talk of splitting since the 1800s, and going back to the beginning of Illinois, there was a divide between downstate and Chicago. However, we were able to maintain a balance. And I know when I was much younger, you'd see people holding statewide office that anyway. And what happened is in 1964, there was a Supreme Court ruling called Reynolds v. Sims. And that really had nothing to do with Illinois. It had to do with Alabama, because during the first half of the 20th century, there had been a great deal of migration from rural areas to urban areas, and in particular, African Americans go to the cities, find opportunities. But in Alabama, you know how we redistrict after every census every 10 years? Well, they went for 50 years and didn't bother redistricting. And so you had a situation where the urban people were greatly underrepresented in state government. And so this was the Warren Court in 1964. And rather than saying, Alabama, you better get your act together, they said, oh, we're gonna change everything for everybody. And prior to that, state governments had been modeled on the U.S. Constitution, the Great Compromise. The House of Representatives was by population, and the Senate was geographically fixed to the states. And so what the states had done is their House of Representatives, they were by population, and the Senate districts were attached to the counties. Maybe not one county, one district. It may have been, 4 little counties together in one district. But when you had that, you always had some measure of representation for rural areas, and it was fixed. It couldn't be gerrymandered. And so when that ruling came down, one of our U.S. senators in Illinois was Everett Dirksen. And Everett Dirksen warned that in any state with a sizable city, this ruling was going to cause all power of state government to be absorbed into that city, and that the rural people would lose their voice. And he was right. That's what happened. And that's why you don't just see movements like this in Illinois. It's in California, Idaho, Minnesota, Colorado, New York, Virginia, because all that power has been absorbed and you have one small area ruling everybody. And that is not the way a Republican form of government, which is in the guarantee clause of the Constitution, it's not supposed to work that way. And so that's what it's down to. And so Illinois had a history of being corrupt. Chicago had a history of being corrupt. But when you apply Reynolds v. Sims to a state like Illinois, where then all that power is going to be absorbed, you end up with the ability to gerrymander as much as you want, and getting an F on the Princeton gerrymandering project, so that any last remains of a voice for outstate Illinois is going to be gone. And you also give them, without any accountability, they then have the ability to drive the state into massive debt. The state will admit to $147 billion in debt on the pensions, but if you look at numbers from places like Moody's, they say the real number is more like $300 billion. And so that's the situation we're in. I call it a dumpster fire, and that's what we're trying to escape from.
Well, that's great. That's interesting. No, I love this idea. I love this movement. I have for a while. Do you know Paul Durr?
Yeah. Oh, you
know
must
Paul?
be in the Libertarian Party, right?
I was for a while. I mean, I'm not in any party now, but I was. My political philosophy is very libertarian, but I don't belong to a party because libertarianism actually embodies some leftist ideas and some right wing ideas. So, like, for me to fall into like a category like that, I did Libertarian Party. I tried the Green Party for 4 years. Now I'm just flying solo. But again, it's more of a philosophical, social, political, economic philosophy than it is anything else. He was on my radio show a bunch of years ago talking about this very thing. That's when I first heard about it, and this is a long time ago. I was fascinated by it because I think I lived, in Portland, Oregon for about 12 years. And I know that I remember realizing this there, that once you leave Portland's very blue. Big cities are very blue. Okay. Right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm not making that claim, and I don't care.
Stating a fact.
To say that once you leave, and especially in the suburbs, the rest of the state was red.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, that's not fair. Because that's like this little dense area, because it's all based on population size. And that's probably a good idea. But like you said, like the logic and the value of representation is being lost by one. It's disproportionate. So the whole identity is being lost. That, you have one person representing. So what do we have? 435 people representing 330 million people. Are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. That doesn't even work. And it wasn't that way. Like Congress did that. I'm not sure if that's what you were talking about earlier, but like in the 1920s, they put the 435 Congress people cap on it, where before it was expanding as populations expanded, which it's supposed to. Okay, because you have one person representing 500,000 people. How can that possibly be legitimate, real, true representation? It can't.
Right. So I agree with you. And in fact, as far as states go, we looked at how many people are in a district for state representation. And Illinois' districts have a lot of people. And whereas you talk to people in New Hampshire, they have 4,000 people in their House of Representatives.
Wow. And that's New Hampshire.
Representative, everybody knows who you are. And so,
that's interesting.
I think 4,000 might be kind of unwieldy.
That's a lot, yeah.
We looked at, what's the average number of people in a state legislative district, and maybe we should shoot for something more like the average. At least that's a start. Right. But I think that the only way that we are ever going to get representative government back, unless you live in Cook County, is it has to be a separate state. If they were to modify or overturn Reynolds v. Sims, yeah, in time it would correct. But the problem with Reynolds v. Sims, that's where we get that well-known phrase, one man, one vote. It sounds so fair until you realize, no, it isn't.
Right.
The founding fathers really struggled. That their main point of contention in writing the Constitution was, how do we balance the representation? And it was ingenious the way they did it, because it's geography and population. And so things went well until the Warren Court screwed it up.
Wow, interesting. Okay. What sort of response are you getting from the, like, when I first posted about this a couple of weeks ago, when I first reached out to you, or a week ago, whatever it was, I just sort of posted about like the organization New Illinois and what it was. I'm like, this is really interesting, guys. Did you even know this is happening? Because most people don't even know what's happening. Mm-hmm. Most people, and take it as you will, we're like, that's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. we don't do that anymore. It's never going to happen, stuff like that. I'm like, I don't know. This is really interesting. And so talk about like, what kind of response are you getting from people? And then also like, how is, what was Article 4 you said in the Constitution? How is that written? But go ahead.
Article 4, Section 3. Let me grab my Constitution here. And to get back to the responses that people have, I remember first thinking about this. This is when I was taking hort classes, and I was lobbying to have backyard chickens in unincorporated areas in Lake County, because in some villages you could have them, others you couldn't. And so they said, well, unless you have like an acre, you can't. And so I was going part of a focus group looking at these things for hoop houses and chickens. And so one of them, which eventually they did change their way.
Yeah, because you're allowed to have chickens in your backyard in Chicago.
Yeah, that's right. So,
so I don't know why you need an acre for chickens.
Exactly.
A lot of people didn't like the idea of the noise, like a rooster crowing at like 4:30.
And so I think that was the stipulation, you could never rooster. But so let's see. So when I was doing those focus groups, there was a guy that worked in county government. I think he was facilitating it. And so he was complaining about Chicago. And I said, well, what about this idea if we were two different states? And he said, well, that would never work, because Chicago is the economic engine of the state. And without Chicago, you'd be driving on dirt roads and turn into Mississippi. And I thought, oh, okay, well, you're involved in government, you know more than me, so it's probably never going to work. But then I found out that was really a myth. Chicago generates a lot of revenue, but it also generates a lot of debt. And again, the key issue is we are entitled as American citizens to have a voice in our government, and we don't. And so anyway, let's see. So there was another part to your question that's escaping me right now.
Well, what does Article 4 actually say? How's it?
Article 4, Section 3. New states may be admitted by the Congress into this union, but no new state shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of any other state, nor any state be formed by the junction of two or more states or parts of states without the consent of the legislatures of the states concerned, as well as the Congress. So sometimes people, they only read the first half of that, and you got to read on. It requires the consent of the state legislature. It requires consent of this. Well, then people will go on to say, how will you possibly ever get the Illinois state legislature to agree to this? And what we have always looked at is the fact that Illinois is on a path to financial destruction. And as they come closer to that, of that cliff, we will be in a position to negotiate with them. And because we can negotiate over the debt, particularly the pension debt. And so We currently have 13 members of the state legislature that support us,
Wow.
and which I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
And obviously, that's not enough to push it over the edge. But what we're constantly doing is talking to them and explaining the logic of what we're doing. And another aspect of that is that the city of Chicago.
You're frozen up here.
I'm frozen?
Okay, now you're unfrozen. Go ahead.
Okay. Chicago is going the way of Detroit. The state would have to legislate that they can declare bankruptcy, but that's where they're at. And the Chicago public schools are like $1 billion in debt. The public transportation was also close to $1 billion in debt. So all this is adding up, and it's not sustainable. And so what really proves the point is people will often, they point to a study by the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute at Southern Illinois University, which
I forgot all about him with the bow tie. Yeah, okay.
Yes. Well, they named it after him. And so they put out this study in 2018 and again in 2021, and it gets a lot of airplay. But the fact is, it's a flawed study that used incomplete information and then drew conclusions far beyond what the data could support. And so people look at that and say, well, this is really not possible because Chicago keeps the rest of the state afloat. But if that were true, why would they have taken $900 million that was earmarked for downstate roads and bridges and funneled it all into the CTA? Because they were almost $1 billion.
The porch tax?
The what?
The porch tax?
The
Is that what it was called? There was a porch tax that was proposed, something like where like basically CTA was in trouble, needed funding, and they were everybody in Illinois except for Chicago had to chip into it.
That sounds like what it was, but they took this was several months ago. They took 900 billion and or 900 million rather, and so meanwhile we have a lot of bridges that are in disrepair, and so. But it just belies the fact that Chicago is keeping the rest of us afloat. I think that what the numbers show, and our organization does work with like national level economic experts. And what the numbers really show is outstate Illinois isn't necessarily supporting Chicago. Chicago isn't supporting the rest of us. And separated from the state of Illinois, we would have a GDP and a population greater than Indiana's. And Indiana's doing fine. Financially, every state that surrounds Illinois is in much better financial position. And one would think that when you've got a major urban area, that there'd be more jobs, that there'd be more prosperity, and there's not. So.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, Chicago's the third largest city in the country, and like it's just well, first of all, it's an energy pit. So you obviously have to it's very what we studied in horticulture, the urban areas like that are not really sustainable without going outside of its inherent systems in order to bring in stuff to its systems, which is by definition, that's what makes it unsustainable. When you need external help, then your system isn't working for itself. So that's just like kind of basic, natural environmental logic. Okay, that's interesting. That's fascinating. Do you go to the General Assembly and tug on their shirts? Like, hey, we got something to tell you guys. We want, how do you approach the Illinois legislator?
Well, what we do, say for instance, where I live, my two legislators are Tom Weber in the House and Craig Wilcox in the Senate. And so what our county committee did was just made an appointment. Well, the first time I made an appointment with Tom Weber, I just went there by myself. And you could tell, he was being very polite as I gave him my spiel, but, I'm imagining that thought bubble over his head like this woman is out of her mind. But a couple of years later, I went back and with 3 or 4 people from the Lake and McHenry County committees. And by then, I don't know if you heard more about us or what, but we had a half an hour scheduled to talk with him, and we were there for 2 hours.
Really?
And when we come to see legislators, we bring a packet of information. And one of the things, if you look on our website, we have grievances. You know how in the Declaration of Independence, the framers had 27 grievances against the king listed there that were like 2 sentences long. Everybody understood what it was about, so they didn't have to go into detail. However, some of our grievances, there's things going on in Springfield that people don't even know what's going on. They may not even have the vocabulary for it. And so our grievances are a couple pages long, and they weren't in our declaration. And so when we come to see them, we bring a packet with our grievances and an explanation of just what we're all about. And I remember saying, well, I know this is a lot of information, and I know you're busy, so you won't have time to read it all. You'll just have time to skim it. He goes, oh no, I'm going to use this in Springfield. And so he's very supportive. Jill Sosnowski in Rockford is very supportive. Craig Wilcox is very supportive. And so there's I'd say, I think it's 13 now. Chris, what's his name? Balkema from down in Grundy County. Just talked to him very recently, and he's gung-ho for New Illinois. I think he may be one of the speakers at our next convention. So, and then Brad Halbrook down in Shelbyville, he's one that has put in the resolution for a new state a few times in the General Assembly. Of course, it never gets past the Rules Committee, but he keeps doing it just to let people know they're still there.
When's your next convention?
It's going to be in November, the first weekend after the election. And the last several times we've had them, they're in Bloomington because that's centrally located. So we typically have them in April and November so that it doesn't interfere with planting time or harvest. Because
that's very cool. I like
one of our natural constituencies is farmers.
Oh, yeah, I would imagine. They've got to have. They're probably over all these stupid regulations from state and federal. You know, like they know how to farm, guys. Let them do it.
Yes.
You know, so that's also the libertarian in me. It's like, you know, let people know what they're doing. Just, you know, you don't need to regulate the hell out of everybody. Some regulations are good. I get it. But yeah, the government's way overreaching nowadays. But anyway, so like that's fascinating. And I'm so glad that you came on to just talk to us about this. Maybe you can come on closer to the convention, because like Bloomington, that's where ISU is, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I've been there. I saw a rock concert in the 90s there. I don't think it's terribly far. I think it's like, what, 2-3 hours away from here? I would love to go to that convention and check it out.
Oh, hey, well, absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be very cool. And I want to ask you about a couple of things just off air, just like, connection. Maybe you can connect me with some people. But anything else? It's been about half an hour, so I don't want to keep you too long. Anything else you want to like kind of wrap it up with? Because I would love to have you on again to like elaborate more and more and more.
Oh, well, I'd love to anytime, David. And I always have the compulsion to call you Dave instead of David, but I know that's you go by David.
But I don't. I go by whatever,
Okay,
Dave,
well, if I slip and call you Dave, then it's
I
okay.
call. I'll tell you all the name off air. I'll tell all the names my mother calls me. But no, I'm just kidding. She's very sweet. But yeah, no, Dave or David is fine. So like, okay, cool. So yeah, let's definitely keep in touch and have you on again. And because again, like there's a huge history. It's like this ties into the history of the nation's development over time.
Yeah.
Like, we allowed 2 new states, in the 1940s and 50s, and that's not that long ago.
No.
Okay. I mean, there are people alive today that were alive then. I mean, so the generation isn't even like gone yet, if you will. So that makes it, what's connected to it, if you will. Yeah, so there's a lot to discuss here for sure. Like the Constitution, the interpretation, Supreme Courts, like that kind of thing, and legislation about it. Like this is fascinating stuff. So much that I don't want to keep you much longer to discuss because we'd be here for like 6 hours. So
let me say one more thing, if I could. One thing you see in the media a lot is they refer to this as secession. Now, from the dictionary definition, you could use that term, but we never do, because secession associate that with the Confederacy, which was, let's take our marbles and go home. And what we are doing is following a legal constitution.
Yeah.
And it's not secession, it's the creation of a new state. And it's happened 5 times in our country's history. Most recently, it was West Virginia. They left Virginia because Virginia was leaving the country. But you have Maine used to be a part of Massachusetts. And, nobody looks at Maine and thinks, oh my gosh, what a bunch of Confederates, And it's simply really has to do with getting the balance back so people outside of the major urban area can have a voice in their own government.
Absolutely. And I think that's essential. It's quintessential for any, like you said, representative democracy or like constitutional republic, where you both kind of mean the same thing. But without representation, then that's what is that? I mean, that's tyranny, it really is, and like, again, just the representation, if it's not proportionate, is not true representation. It's a false sense of representation, and that's not representation at all. So logically and morally speaking. So, okay. Well, thank you so much, G.H.Merrit, for coming on. Appreciate it. Nice to see you again. And let's stay in touch. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Let's Talk Lake County. I'm your host, David Rich. Till next time, keep talking. All right. Hold on a second.